Good morning, party people, and welcome to another episode of Office Hours SQL Pilot. Good morning. Good to see you. I say morning, it's what, 10 a.m.? 10 a.m. here in Vegas, so it's probably afternoon for a bunch of y'all already. Today is a regular work day for me doing consulting with a client, one of my 2 day SQL critical cares. And I just finished writing up their findings. The way that those gigs usually work is the first morning of day one, I get together and analyze all kinds of stuff about their SQL server with them together over Zoom. Then around lunchtime, I break off and I start writing the findings, the things that I'm going to teach them on day two. I also work on that in the morning of day two and then send that over to them. Then in the afternoon, we get back together and talk through the findings. Good morning, Shane. Today I actually woke up at like 2:30 a.m., which is not unusual for me. But then I use that morning time to go through and catch up on emails, work on the client's findings or whatever. So now that it's like 10 a.m., I'm done with it. I'll probably go grab some lunch and then take a nap even before I have to go do their findings call, because I think their findings calls are like 1 a.m. 1 p.m. 1 p.m. Vegas time. I'm going to go open up my calendar because I'm not even sure. Oh, yeah. I got a few hours before I have to do that. So perfect to go to have lunch and then go take a nap. And I figured I should totally do on office hours. I've had a zoo of a schedule the last few weeks. I've been traveling all over, then setting up for the Black Friday sale. I should point out. There's the magic button for Black Friday. My Black Friday sale's going on now. If you go to brentozar.com/Black Friday, you can save big on my level 1 bundle, my level 2 bundle, fundamentals and mastering lifetime courses. I should also say that I'm suffering from one heck of a cough and sore throat. I have a giant bag of throat lozenges here that I need to dip into. Didn't think about grabbing one of these before the call, and before the webcast, and I totally should have done that. Especially with office hours, I have the tendency to talk and dry my voice out a lot. So we'll see how many minutes I can actually make it before I end up giving up here. So let's go hit your first question. So the top voted question is from Mailbox. Mailbox says, does DBA still need to be the only ones with permission and responsibility to roll out code changes in production? And he continues with, are there shops in which this is a developer task that doesn't involve the DBA? Yes, there are many. And I'm going to give you the classic example, StackOverflow.com. StackOverflow.com didn't have DBAs review code. Developers were allowed to push changes out into production. That's yes on the giant StackOverflow.com. This was true. So there are plenty of shops out there where the DBAs don't have to get involved in production, in changes to code in production. The question that I'd ask you as a database administrator is, what's the value that you're adding in changes to production? What is it that you're bringing to the table in the deployment process? If all you're doing in terms of value is double checking the code, well, couldn't someone else do that who isn't a DBA? Well, but I have special knowledge. What kind of knowledge do you have? This is where it gets a little uncomfortable when the development team and the DBA team start pressing each other, trying to figure out what that value-added knowledge is. And when you get deep enough, sometimes DBA is just like a roadblock in putting things into production. And when we start reviewing the things that haven't been allowed to go into production, we start asking better questions like, what kind of value are we really bringing here? Hey, DK Kimbo. SQL Pilot says the people doing that quality assurance check could be the QA team or DevOps. Absolutely. There's no reason that it necessarily has to be a database administrator. Now, you may be bringing a whole lot of value to the table. It just depends on what that answer is, and that'll help guide whether it makes sense for you to be involved in the process. Next up, MyTeaGotCold says, is there ever a good use case For SSIS, yes, absolutely. Moving data, keeping data in sync between a couple of different places. He continues with, after 2 days of using it, I burn with righteous fury and beg my colleagues to let me torch it. Oh, that's interesting. So you don't feel like you're good at something after 2 days of working with it. That tells me more about you than it tells me about the tool. I wish that every tool could be picked up and mastered in 2 days. But like DK Kimbo says over in chat, sometimes it's going to take you 3. Next up, let's see here. Next up, we have Mailbox, another mailbox question, who says, is it still good advice to disable hyperthreading? Well, hold on here. This is kind of like the question, do you still beat your wife? See how that question's kind of loaded? Because it implies that in the past you beat your wife. That's the same as this question here. Is it still good advice to disable hyperthreading? I don't think it ever was. I don't think disabling hyperthreading across the board was ever good advice across the board everywhere. Yes, there have been some specific scenarios where it makes sense to leave hyperthreading off because it effectively cuts your CPU's cache in half. But most of the time, more processing power is actually a good idea, especially given how bad your queries are. Next up, Sanjay asks, what are your thoughts on using cross-database queries to selectively opt into different compatibility levels? For example, put one database at one compatibility level and another database at another compatibility level. This is one of those things that sounds really great in theory, but then if you actually have to get different people to change the database that they're using based on what compat level they want, it's not going to scale very well because you actually need to change it by query. Some queries need different compatibility levels if you're going to go to that level of tuning. So it's not like you can just assign a user's database to be different based on what compat level they want. So for me, that's not really a way to get across the finish line. You're better off hinting specific queries or using plan guides to get the behavior that you want. Hey, Spitfire, good to see you. Next up, Ross asks, what are your thoughts on the Windows Service account for SQL Server having sysadmin permissions? It's just always been that way. I have no thoughts on it. I don't do security consulting, so it's just the same thing that it's always been with SQL Server, so I just leave that the way that it is. Next up, Ravonna Renslayer, that's a mouthful, that sounds like a kind of a cool name, asks, what is your opinion of natively compiled stored procedures? Do you see them used much? Almost never. Now here's the thing though, I'm a performance tuning consultant and people come to me when they're not happy. Nobody comes and wants to shell out thousands of dollars when they're happy. When they're happy, they just go and spend that money on other things like new MacBook Pros or whatever. So it could be that there are a huge population of people who are using natively compiled stored procedures that are happy with it. I've just never seen them. And I don't seem to see them on things like forums or Stack Overflow either. So there you go. Next up, a brand new question from GeneralDogsBody, who says, hi, we have an audit table with about 500 million records. The clustered index is a GUID, and it's causing us performance issues on inserts. We want to change the clustered index to a new column that's an identity. Is there a preferred method to do this? Yes, on a table of that size, you're typically looking at a bit of an outage when that goes and happens. If you can afford to take the outage, copy the data from the old table into the new table, copy it across from one to the other, doing a select insert or insert into select from so that it moves over into the new structure. Then you can drop the old table. That will involve a little bit of an outage because you're going to have to hold a lock open while you go through and do that. DK Kimbo says, is Brent in a virtual background of his office? No, this is actually real stuff here. This is I can pick up and interact with there. Next up, SQL Bob asks, what are the use cases for SQL Server with data files sitting on an SMB file share? I think that's kind of stupid. I don't think it's a really good idea personally, because the problem with an SMB file share that you run into, the problems that I've run into with an SMB file share is it shares the same network pipe as regular SQL Server network traffic. So when you do things like back up a database to a network file share, you're reading from the SMB file share and you're writing somewhere else. It's real easy to saturate the network, take SQL Server offline, it fails cluster health checks, things like that. Same thing with like a DBCC check DB will saturate the network because it's typically storage bound. I'm not a good fan of that. If you have to do it, you just want two separate network interfaces, one for where the data and log files live and another for your regular network traffic. Next up, VoteBrentForPresident says, Hola, Vato. When I'm getting the aggressive under-indexing warning from SP Blitz Index, where can I dig deeper to find out which indexes I need? I've gone through the module tuning indexes to avoid blocking, but I haven't really found the tools for solving that. You have to go through the rest of the modules in that class, too. You can't just go through that one module. The way training courses work is you have to attend the whole class, not just parts of it. So in my Mastering Index Tuning class, which happens to be on sale this month for Black Friday, my Mastering Index Tuning class, we go through the DEATH method, DEATH. Those are the tools that you want to use in order to find out which indexes work best for you on that table. So check those out. Next up, Peter asks, Shay says apparently you can master it after 2 or 3 days. Peter says, any tips for dealing with high VLF counts when using SQL Server AGs? So with SP Blitz, we warn you about high VLF counts. I want to see our threshold is like 2,000. The reason that we warn you there is that so that it doesn't hit 10,000 or 20,000 without you knowing about it first and heading it off. If you've only got a couple thousand VLFs, that's fine. Just fix it by growing out the log file to the destination size that you need. And you don't have to take too much action on those existing VLFs in an AG because it's a giant pain in the rear. If you've already hit the point where you've got 10, 20, 30,000 VLFs in that database, then you will have to take action, and unfortunately you're going to have to shrink it on each node in the AG, which means failing the database around, which is a giant pain in the rear, but that unfortunately is what you have to do. The other thing I should say too, you could take it out of the AG, fix it on the primary, and then reseed it out across to the rest of the AG nodes. But either way, it's a pain in the rear. Kang asks, what is your opinion of Azure Synapse? I have no opinion on it whatsoever. Because Microsoft has this thing where they change BI product names every 2 to 3 years. They change their vision of what the product is. If your vision changes every 2 to 3 years, you don't have a vision. You have beer goggles. Oh, I think the future is Azure Synapse Fabric Power BI. Get a longer vision. I don't have any faith in that team's vision, given how rapidly they keep cycling through visions. If you're seeing that many visions, maybe you should lay off the wacky tobacco. Next up, asking for a friend says, are cloud databases overrated? No, they're great for specific use cases, just like SQL Server. It says, I have a teeny database in a SQL managed instance. I was asked to move to Azure DB, but still hundreds of dollars a month. Could move to on-premises. Direct cost of there would be zero. What? You have a free place to host databases? Really? Where does your SQL Server licensing come from? The folks at Microsoft would like to have a word with you because Microsoft SQL Server has this thing called software assurance that you're supposed to be paying every year. It's not a one-time cost unless you want to stay on a really old version of SQL Server, because otherwise you have to pay every time you do an upgrade. Now, if you have a way to run SQL Server for free, please tell me. I'd love to hear more about it because I got lots of clients who would like to take advantage of that. But otherwise, it's not really free, is it? Wink, wink. Next up, MyTeaGotCold says, do you ever see in-memory OLTP becoming the norm? Absolutely not. If you go through the documentation, you see that it requires 2x amount as the starting point that they recommend is twice the memory size as your data size. Most of my clients kind of shrink out at that and they're like, whoa, hold on, we can't really afford that. So that ends that discussion pretty quickly. Next up, Nathan asks, is there a good way to know if a given SQL operator in an execution plan is a blocking operator or not? Oh, I don't know that there's a good idea or a good way of telling that by looking at the operator or its properties, but the place where you want to go is SQLServerFast.com. SQLServerFast.com has an execution plan reference up at the top. Click on that. And Hugo Cornelis has detailed every operator out there in SQL Server, and he tells you things like whether or not it's a blocking operator. So that's SQLServerFast.com. Tell Hugo I said hi. He's a really nice guy. Heimdall asks, do you like or use the live query statistics in SSMS? If you Google for Brent Ozar buggiest feature in SQL Server, I've got a blog post about that feature. I think it's the single buggiest feature in all of SQL Server. Do I want it to work? Yes. Would I use it regularly if it did work? Yes. But it doesn't work. And because it doesn't work, I'm kind of disappointed. Like DK Kimbo says, it's fun to watch the little green dots moving around on the screen. I really thoroughly enjoy that. And I think it makes for really good demos. It's just that I have to tell people when I go to use it, all right, the feature I'm about to click on has 3 different options. 1 is it's going to work. 2 is it's not going to show anything. And 3, it's going to lock up SSMS so hard that I have to close it and restart it. When my odds are that bad, I'm not really keen on using that particular feature. And then we'll do one more. Let's see here. Oh, this is interesting. Maciej asks, have you ever rejected an offer for consulting because of ethical reasons? And if yes, could you tell us why? For ethical reasons about what the company does, no. And I've worked with companies that other people might have rejected. I'm going to give you an example of one, a gun manufacturing company. Now, I have relatives who have guns, who hunt with guns, who go deer hunting and pheasant hunting, turkey hunting, and all that. I don't hunt. I have no business owning a gun. I would probably shoot myself in the foot. I've shot guns before, shot shotguns before, and it's just not really my thing, but it's legal and people do it. And I'm kind of like, sure, why not? It's a business. I can see why other people, like if you had a moral belief that all guns were wrong, I can see how you would be like, oh, hunting rifles are bad and I don't want to take this business. If it was a company that was manufacturing machine guns, I think obviously that would probably be different. But I can see why people would skip out on some of those. When Bitcoin when cryptocurrencies were on fire there for a while, I thought, oh, would I ever work for a crypto company? If a crypto company for some reason was using SQL Server, would I be willing to take their money in exchange for making their crypto stuff go faster, work faster, or whatever? And obviously that never came up because they prefer open source type solutions. But I thought a lot about that because I thought it was interesting. And at the end of the day, I thought, yeah, I probably would. And I would probably have even taken like cryptocurrency as a payment because I thought it was interesting there when it was all, I wouldn't want to have a whole lot invested in it personally, but I can see how it would be kind of fun to play around with that. All right, so there we go. There's a bunch of y'all's questions from office hours. I am now going to go probably downstairs, go grab some lunch, and then take a nap before my client call at 1 p.m. Pacific. Hope that y'all had fun, learned something, and oh, don't forget, I have my annual Black Friday sale running right now. If you go to brentozar.com/Black Friday, you can get like 80% off courses when you combine in the bundle savings plus all kinds of other cool stuff. Oh, the Kazakh, thank you for the subscription there. Very cool. For folks of you who haven't subscribed, well, I can't bother saying anything to them because obviously they're watching an ad break right now on Twitch anyway. But if you go to brentozar.com/Black Friday, that sale runs all November long. And this year we also have a new buy now, pay later option as well. So if you want to get like my lifetime bundles, you can schedule payments out across 6 months or 18 months, however you like. That option's available only on the one-time purchase products, the things like lifetime bundles. It's not available for subscriptions. So thanks for hanging out with me today. Hope that y'all had fun, learned something. And DK Kimbo asked a good question. DK Kimbo says, do future courses, are they included in the lifetime bundle? Yes, as long as it's SQL Server. I can imagine a time in the future, not in 2024, but probably years after that. I can imagine a time in SQL Server where I say I'm done shipping new courses on SQL Server and I want to ship courses on another platform. Maybe it's like Postgres or if it was Azure SQL DB, anything in Azure really, I would still include it. But if it was something like Postgres, he says Azure Synapse, I will never, as long as I live, do anything on Microsoft's BI platform. And the Power BI, I think, is the bomb. Power BI, I think, is really cool, but I'm just not qualified to teach that, and I would never want to teach that. But never, as long as I live, would I do anything like Fabric or whatever. I think that's a learning time bomb. You're flushing your money down the drain. But if it was other platforms, I would feel differently. Like Aurora, Amazon Aurora would be another one where I wouldn't include it. But anything that I do related to SQL Server, and I will tell you that I have 2 courses that I'm working on right now for SQL Server, so stuff will continue to come out for that. All right, so thanks for hanging out with me today, and I will see y'all on the next version of Office Hours. Adios, y'all.